name's Warren Bernhardt, and I'm here to welcome you to this first in a series of videotapes on Homespun, devoted to the study and the practice of playing jazz on the piano. So it's really a pleasure to be here. I've previously done a set of audio tapes for Homespun, and this is a little bit more interesting too. I'm sure you can learn a lot from being able to watch me while I'm giving examples. And in particular, this first tape that we're doing is something that I'd had in mind for a long time. I wanted to try to give some insight for players that are just beginning on the keyboard. Maybe you have a rudimentary knowledge of some chords, or you've played at parties, or something small, but this is not geared to the advanced student, this first tape at least. And although there may be something in it that will benefit the advanced player, but I'm really trying to get to you folks that are just starting out in jazz and need to find some a knowledgeable person to give you some advice and show you some different exercises to play. So that's how we're going to begin. Now, we're fortunate to play the piano because in jazz there's a wealth of information available to us just to begin with. Stuff that other great artists have laid down throughout the years, starting with like Jelly Roll Morton, and then the stride pianist James P. Johnson, Fats Waller, great players, and then Art Tatum came along, and he did everything on the piano. There wasn't anything he couldn't do. And all of these people recorded, you know. And then we got into the era of bebop musicians like Bud Powell up here. Here's a picture of Bud up there on my wall. And guys came along after that, Ahmad Jamal and Errol Garner and George Shearing, Dave Brubeck, and then Red Garland, Wynton Kelly, Kenny Drew, people like that. And then Bill Evans came along and changed everything around again. After Bill came the modern guys, there's Keith Jarrett and Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock. There's such a wealth of musical knowledge coming from these guys that I consider that a basic starting point for anybody that's going to get involved with the keyboard, is to listen to these people. I only mentioned a handful of them, you know, some of the greats. They all recorded. There are books out, if you learn to read music, that can be very beneficial for your playing. I know I have Bud Powell books and Bill Evans books. And there's Bill too. I'm mentioning my favorites as I go along. So my first advice, as far as that goes, is to listen a lot to records. If you have a record player that has an adjustable pitch, and your piano or whatever keyboard you have at home is out of tune with it, you can adjust the pitch and then try to play along with some of these favorites or if you find certain voicings or certain ideas, try to pick them out at the piano and play along with the records. I find that as being a very valuable way of starting. And I'm going to give you some more information today that will enable you to do this with more ease. So here we are in a position where there's this great history of the instrument behind us, which gives us a big advantage. I mean, even more than guitar players or saxophonists, I think. There have been so many great pianists that can help us in our quest for discovering jazz and what our talents are, what our individual abilities. They may be hidden, you know, they have to be worked out and discussed, you know, in the inner mind. You have to qualify your ear to be able to play some of the things in jazz, because it's an intricate art, and especially at the piano, you're not dealing with just a single note at a time. You know, we have big chords that we're working with. So we have to begin to discover some of these things, how to voice these chords, and ease of approach. They'll keep us relaxed while we're working. Certain elements like that. Another thing that I forgot to mention that I think is very important, even if you aren't interested in classical music, here's another wealth of literature that's available to us. I mean, if you do work on your reading, you can learn more about your jazz playing from working on, say, just the Bach two-part inventions for the keyboard. You can learn more playing those pieces than you can in many hours of playing just on your own. You know, there's so much there that'll teach you about music, and also the independence of motion involved in the musculature, the mental capacity to handle more than one thing at one time. And we're going to be focusing on not only a melody line, but we're going to be working on the rhythm that it's played in, and we're also going to have to harmonize things at the same time and start to get an ease of moving around the keyboard in different keys. So when you think of all those jazz greats and all that they've done and all that's available to you, and then you think of like Bach and Beethoven and Brahms and Bartók and Rachmaninoff, Chopin, Ravel, Debussy, here we are extremely fortunate to have this wealth of knowledge available to us. So with a little time and energy and work and investigation on your part, you can do a lot for your own playing, even without me or without the audio tapes that we've done on Homespun and things like that. You can do a lot for your playing on your own, is all I'm saying. And I consider it extremely important for you to think a little bit about that. Find your favorite things that you've heard. Try to see how they voice the chords. You know? It'll take you a while to begin to assimilate some of this information, but I think it'll be of great value. Now, what I'd like to start it with at the keyboard, we're going to go to a shot that shows a split screen where you have a shot from above so you can really see what I'm doing with my hands. And then we'll start some work on some very simple stuff at first. Now, at this point, I'd like to start with something. This is a very basic set of moves, and this is really for beginners. So if you're more advanced, you can press your fast forward button, although you may learn something by staying with me for a few minutes. We're talking about grabbing notes here. You have a basic position where the hand is relaxed and the arm is relaxed, and you can fan your hand out. As you can see, in that one position, my wrist is not moving now. I can cover, you know, a whole bunch of notes. Or in the left hand, it may be easier for you to see, you know. But my wrist is essentially staying where it is. So we have a motion like this, which enables us to cover a lot of territory without moving the wrist. And then there's also motions we can do like this, in and out. You can feel the keys, get your fingers in between them. I hope your fingers aren't too wide to fit in, or else you are in difficulty. But so there's all kinds of motions. We can catch a note right here, or if we have to catch it with our thumb in, we move in like this. So that gives us this kind of motion with the wrist. Already we can cover a lot of territory just by doing that. See? I'm trying to get to the ease of functioning at the keyboard and a relaxed approach to it. So we have a loose wrist and a nice shape in the hands and a position for the wrist. Now the very next most important thing, once you've achieved that, say I put my hand on C through G here, my left hand. Now how am I going to get up to the, say I want to play a C scale, right? This is a very basic move. When I run out of fingers, I have to come over, either with this finger or even that finger. That's a little awkward. But so here's a pivot move that we have that's going to enable us to do, especially in the right hand when we're soloing, we're going to do a lot of this pivoting. Now here's where it's valuable for you to work on all your scales. You know what I mean by the scales, I'll explain in one moment. We have this pivoting motion where the ascending in the left hand or descending in the right hand, where we come over either to the fourth finger or the third finger. I number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like this. So that's a very simple move. In the right hand, it's difficult to see on the video, but it's the same move, pivoting as you go down, coming over. You actually rotate your ulnar radius bone on your thumb as you're coming over. Now, coming down in the left hand, there's a whole other move. When I run out of fingers here, if I come down this scale and I run out of fingers, where do I go? How do I play the rest of the scale? So the thing I want to do is play maybe 3 notes of this, and then I'm going to move my thumb under my finger that's depressing this note. And by doing this, I'm changing the position of my wrist from here to here. Now I'm in the next position. And I do it again. So this is some very basic piano technique. And when you're soloing, you see I'm doing this motion, I'm doing this in and out motion, and I'm doing a lot of pivoting over and under, thumb under and pivoting over. Now at this point I'd like to talk about some of the scales. You know, we've got our hand positions pretty good now, and we're relaxed and have a nice attitude towards the keyboard, and we're not afraid of it or anything. It's our friend, it's smiling at you. It's very important in jazz in particular, and in any music, to learn all the scales involved. And our basic scales are the diatonic scale, which in C major is just the white notes. It's a whole tone, a semitone, a whole tone, a whole tone, a whole tone, and a semitone. Like, or an A major, or A flat. And they each have a different fingering. I'm going to leave this up to you. This is some basic knowledge that you can, you know. The minor scales ascend this way and then they come down this way, the melodic minors. There's a natural sixth and a major seventh. Coming down is the natural seventh and a flatted sixth. And then there's the melodic minor. And then there's other scales. There's whole tones. That's nice. We use them all in jazz. There's Arabian scales, you know. You may want to pick up a book of scales and a thesaurus of scales or something like that you can look at to learn them. But it's very important for our fingering and also our ease with the keyboard to learn all the scales, because we use them all the time in jazz. For instance, if I write a tune and the tenor player will say, well, what scale do you use on that chord? You know, right away I have to know what scale I'm going to use. Oh, I use the diminished scale. And those are things we'll get into in a later volume, but nice scales for jazz. But basically, the diatonic scale is something I want to focus on now, which is in the key of C, it's just the white notes. Now, if I say play descending diatonic thirds in C major, what I mean is like they're an interval a third apart coming down that scale. Or say in, you'll have to figure this out for yourself too, say in ascending diatonic thirds in the left hand in D flat major. You have to find the D flat scale and then pick every other note. What I'm driving at is an exercise that I'll show you in a few minutes that will really acquaint you with the keyboard. It's not really jazz, but some of it could be used in playing popular music, and you'll discover a lot of chords and harmonies by doing this exercise, just kind of off the wall. They'll bounce off at you. Now, basically what I want to talk about is the triads. And the triads, a triad is the 1, 3, and 5 of a scale. If we number the tones 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and back to 1 again, or 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, that's about as far as we number in jazz. If we number those, if I go too fast for you, I'm trying to get a lot in an hour, so or an hour and a half. So don't forget to use the rewind. You know, it's very important. If you miss something, come back to it and play it a few times, and you'll pick it up. So we're numbering tones. If we play a C major triad, starting with 1 on C, we have 1, 3, and 5 will be the triad. Now, if you play diatonic triads, either ascending or descending, you can keep the same hand position, or you can go like this, and just move your thumb. Now, say I put a bass line against that, just a C and a G and a C, and I play. I'm using only diatonic triads in C major now. You begin to hear some harmonies that are quite nice, some of them. Now, there's there are the two inverted triads too. Say I take these notes, C, E, and G, right? And I bring this C up and play it up here. I have what's called the first inverted triad, the first inversion of C major, which is 3, 5, and 8, or 1. 3, 5, 1. Now using that position, I can also move diatonically. So try putting your hand here and then play C and a G and a C. You hit some pretty major ninths and major sevenths that way. Where I'm playing the fifth, the major seventh, the 10th, or I'm playing the major seventh, the major ninth, and the fifth. Pretty chords. Now, if I take that inverted triad, the first inversion, and I take this E and I move it up an octave here, and I play this chord, I have what's called the second inversion of C major. Now we can do the same thing on this harmonic movement. I know this isn't jazz or blues or anything yet, but bear with me. Now you're getting a feeling for, now we've got these chords at our disposal, we've got these. So, you know, even by staying in C in the bass, or maybe we can go up into F using... See what I'm doing? You see from above there? I'm going from one inversion to the other. Now, using any of those combinations of the three inversions, moving diatonically, this is a snap in C major, by the way. But when we start getting into F and B flat on the flat side of the cycle in fifths, and G and D and A on the sharp side of the cycle of fifths, you'll notice it gets a lot more difficult. But for now, maybe you could try with this is really what we call the Ionian mode, from C to C. So I'll say an Ionian thing. Now, it has a certain characteristic sound to it. Add a little samba rhythm or something, and just fool around with this in that key. You can change the bass note, maybe go to an F in the bass, maybe a G, maybe you could even experiment. Ooh, that's interesting. That doesn't quite work, but just use your ear a little bit and investigate. Try different bass notes against this. At the same time, you can work with your left hand, getting the same movement. So you get the diatonic triads in C major and the inverted ones. Or because we're going to be playing in jazz a lot of chords in the left hand, you know. So any work you do on these triads, we could use the C minor scale. Say I'll play that scale, and then we can come up, or with a natural six. So all these triads are very important. Now maybe the next most difficult key would be F, and here we have a B flat in it. So if we try to play, to make allowance for moving up to that. Or we take the first inversion. Remember, we come up. Or we could use that against the C. Well, here I've got an F scale in the right hand and a C in the bass, which gives us our seventh. Now basically what I'm getting down to is once you learn these diatonic triads in major and minor, all through the keys. You can start experimenting with some very odd harmonies. Maybe that's just coming down triads chromatically and all against the same bass note. It gives you quite a lot of different things to work from. Maybe you like the way C against E sounds. Another thing you can do with triads, this is fun. You don't have to play them all at the same time. You can break them. You see that in Mozart a lot or something, but you may want to, you can do them this way too. So, yeah, as you get used to it, you can divide your hand into two parts and go like this. That's fun in 6, or you can do things in see what I'm driving at? Here we're getting a feeling for the keyboard, and I'm using nothing but triad chords, or in the minor keys. I added a 4th note there. I shouldn't do that at this point. Now I know I may be moving very fast, and this is going to take a while. I urge you just to make things up at home, just using these triads, getting the motions of them. Say you'd want to hear the key of E flat, well, until you get really fluent at them. You know, that'll have a different feeling than the key of D, you see. And each key has its own fingering, you know. Sometimes you can combine, play like this. Say we go back to C major again, and just play this again. I'm just moving parallel diatonic thirds. And you get some nice... maybe just parallel. This really helps you to achieve a feeling for the keyboard that's going to help you later on when we start improvising on actual songs. So experiment is the best way I can put it. I'm giving you a little push in a direction here, but I think you'll find something of value in it. And you'll also start learning a lot with your ear about sounds that please you and sounds that displease you, which is going to form the essence of your playing at a later point. I play what I like and don't play what I don't like. Now there's something you may have noticed when you started working with the triads and the diatonic scales, that when you play them, you sound different than I do when I play them. And I must confess, you can't see the sustain pedal here that I'm using, but I was doing a lot of pedaling while I was showing you those chords, so they would have sounded disconnected like this when I was playing them. But I was grabbing the pedal, and then as soon as I hit the next chord, I was releasing and grabbing it again. I wasn't smearing it together like this. And if you have an electric keyboard, like a synthesizer or something that you're working on, and if you don't have the luxury of a real piano, make sure to hook up the sustain pedal, because at the same time you're working with the triads, it's an opportunity to get your pedaling so that it becomes second nature. Like, I didn't even realize for a long time that I was using the pedal, much less being able to tell you about it. It just comes naturally after a while. So I was maybe, any notes that I wanted to hold through, I was holding, and then every time I hit a chord, I was grabbing it with the pedal. Not every time, but quite often. Maybe when I was playing like this, I was holding the pedal and then holding it again. Now you have to listen all the time that you're doing that particular exercise or any of the things that we'll be talking about, because only your own ear is going to be the judge of how hard you strike the note, which, if you want to bring out one note stronger than the others, your ear is going to tell that, and that's going to give a motor response to your, the nerves and the fibers, muscle fibers in your arm. So you always have to be listening to what you're doing. That's a basic premise that we're going to go on. Like if you want to hit things right together, you don't want them to go, or you don't want there to be a little, what we call a flam in there. You want them to the hammers all to strike at the same time. So there's a certain amount of precision involved, both in your sustain pedal and in your fingers, So I leave that up to you, as I do all the rest of it. I really can't tell you anything about your own playing. You're discovering the piano in this series, and that's an extremely important word, because you're going to discover things about yourself that you never knew existed, and that's going to be a lot of pleasure and satisfaction that's going to be derived from that, as well as some good music, I hope. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit at this point about taking a popular song, which a lot of jazz is based on popular songs. We take a Gershwin tune or a Jerome Kern tune or something, and we improvise on it. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the melodic way of approaching a song, so that it becomes more of a jazz tune than just just the way it's written on a lead sheet. And I thought for this example, there's a tune that we play a lot in jazz called Autumn Leaves. And if you picked up a lead sheet of it and say it had no key signature, it was in the key of A minor, and the melody would look like written in 4/4 time, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. It would be very square, and if you read the notes. And there's something we want to do. We want to get more life into that melody. We want to start discovering how it is to get a jazz feel, a swing feel into it. One way to think about, if you think of each individual beat, 2, 3, 4, 1. In your mind, if you start subdividing that beat into what we call an eighth note triplet, so that every beat would be going, there'd be inside that, in that beat, you'd hear 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's going to set up in your mind's eye what we call the shuffle feel, or straight ahead time, or jazz time. So you may say we're going to play Autumn Leaves. You don't want to. Like that, the first phrase, first couple phrases, maybe you want it to. You want to get that swing feel in there, so you get a little bounce going. And now that's something you can pick any tune. You don't have to necessarily use this particular example. But I thought it's a relatively simple tune, and it has a repeating motif in the melody that it's going to be fun later on when we start improvising. Now I'm going to assume that you know something about putting together chords. I don't really have the time. We could spend 3 or 4 hours just talking about the basic chord voicings. And when you get that if you see a lead sheet in front of you, say Autumn Leaves, it's going to say D minor 7th on the after the pickup notes. So I'm assuming you know what a D minor 7th is. Now, we haven't gone into this, but it's going to be a minor chord, and then the 7th is going to be present, and it's basically what it means. The next chord is going to be G 7th, which is a G triad again, and we have the 7th. Then it's going to say C major 7th, which is not regular 7th, not dominant 7th, but major 7th. And then it's going to have a F major 7th. Now this may say something off the wall on the lead sheet, but I call it a B minor 7th with a flat 5, which is a B minor 7th is here, and if we flat the 5, we just bring it down. Flatting means taking off, so we bring the 5 down, and then we're going to have an E 7th, it says, and then an A minor 7th. So I'm assuming that you know a little bit about chords now. I'm going to start showing you a little bit about changing voicings around. It's helpful if your hand is big enough to reach a 10th. I don't know if that's possible. It's very easy for me. Another way, if your hand is too small, you can go like this, hit the G with a pedal, and then pick it up. Because we use tenths a lot. That's one way of voicing your left hand on a tune like this. So say, maybe if you can't reach that, you can just play the root chords. Now here I threw in a major second there, but it sounds nice. And then, now in any of these chords you can do the different inversions we talked about. You can bring the bottom note up and put it up an octave, or I can bring that up again. Those are all A minor 7th chords, although the A is not always in the bass, but I can pick a voicing like that. That sounds... I can hit the bass note and then play the chord. That's one way of doing it. You'll have to begin to discover sounds that you like on it. Let me go back to the melody. If I thought of all the music that we're playing in terms of a like an esoteric triangle, you know, in a circle, at one point would be the melody we're working on, at another point would be the harmonies that are involved, and another point would be the rhythm. And every time we discuss a song or an aspect of jazz, we've got to consider those 3 points. They all enter into it, they intermesh, they give rise to the totality of the sound. And your understanding of those different points, sometimes you have to focus on one and then the other. We spoke a little bit about subdividing the rhythm into triplets, right? That's the rhythmic aspect. Now, let's just take the melody for a moment, and we'll work on that and forget about the harmonies. If I want to make that tune a little more interesting, I'd have to sit down and look at the scales that were involved in each of those chords. It'd start out with a D minor 7th, so I'm going to have a D minor scale. I'm going to use the major 6th in this example. And then a G. It's not a G major with an F sharp in it because it's a G 7th, a dominant 7th. And then a C major. Now, an F major 7th would ordinarily have a... But that doesn't sound quite right. So I want to call it what we call a raised 4th or a Lydian scale in F major. I'm going to put a B in that instead of a B flat. So now B minor scale with with a flat 5. A B minor has an F sharp, but I'm going to flat the 5. B minor flat 5 scale. And I could use the minor second rather than the major second. Now all of those scales are based on, so far in those first, is it 6 chords or 5 chords, are based on the C major scale. So we're just dealing with the same scale will fit all these chords. So now here we get to the E7th. Now your regular E scale is, well, we're going to play a 7th. And we can use either the regular 6th or we can flat the 6th because we're going back to A minor. Am I getting ahead of you? If I am, feel free to run back on this. But so here I've structured the tune so that only with the addition of an F sharp and a G sharp when we hit the E chord, we're using the same scale to play our melody and anything else that we want to play. So, you know. I use the G sharp, and I could use the harmonic minor too. Now the A minor, I could use that scale. I could vary those. You know, there's several ways you can play. I wouldn't use that, but I might use the melodic minor scales. So here we have a way of approaching the melody by keeping in mind the various scales that we're going to use on that. So it could be 2, 3, 4, 1. You notice I'm adding a little ornamentation. Talk more about that later, but so I've freed myself up away from that original, you know, the boring way of playing it, into giving it some life. Now we may use a lot more ornaments. Basic ones are like grace notes, or we can use a group of grace notes. You have to be careful, you know, you get syrupy if you use too many of those. Or we can use some of the triads, or thirds. And we can use little passing tones. Let me just give an example. Little turns. So I'm just playing on those scales. You begin to find things that you like, that you think sound good on this particular song. Maybe you just, another nice thing you can do is maybe state the melody. Now you can answer yourself, and then play the melody, and then answer yourself. Melody. I'm doing some other motions there, but maybe you can pick them up as we go on. So we've got a whole new territory we can work on now. You can play the melody of the song, but you can make it have some more life. And then after you've played the melody for one phrase, the second 8 bars of the piece, you could actually just start improvising on those scales. So like this. already you've opened it up. Now, all those tones I was using, except for some of the grace notes, all belong to the basic scales that I mentioned. In case you've forgotten them, run back and see them. The D minor, the G, 7th, the C, the F with the raised 4th, the B minor, or it could have either the C or the C, and then the E, the A minor. So you got a lot of work to do right there. I mean, you can start doing your own improvisation on it. Maybe practicing different ways of voicing the left hand. You can add notes, also notes of those scales. I don't know if your hand is big enough to do that. That's a nice way of doing a major 7th or major 9th. See what I'm doing there? That Lydian 4th. Now you notice before I was doing some inside, what I call inside motion. See, we have the end of the phrase. You can do this. I have an inside line. See what I've done, I've kept the melody up top and the chords in the bottom, and I had this. These are all things you're going to have to start developing with your own ear, the way you want to harmonize a given tune. Now we've shifted over to the harmony point. It's really easy to shift between these and talk about them at the same time. Little things like playing an A minor and then having a descending line. You hear that in Latin music. It works nice in that last phrase of Autumn Leaf. And then we can have our inside. Let's talk about the release of the tune, the bridge for a minute. It goes. So like another B minor 7th with a flat 5 to an E 7th with a flatted 9th. See, I take the 9th and I flat it. And you can do this. Then it goes to a D minor 7th. You can use either hand in the middle. And then a G7th, or you can add a 13th to it. Remember, we count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13th. That gives you a nice chord. To a C major 7th. To an F major 7th. So some of those chords are the same as the chords that happen in the first 2 8-bar phrases of the song. Some of the phrases that happen in the release are to the same harmonies, but they're just juxtaposed. Like we start on this chord, then to the E 7th, to the A minor. You can make that major 7th, 7th, 6th. And then to D minor 7th, to G 7th, C major 7th, to F major 7th. So you see, we're using the same chords. Now we come to the last 8 bars. Another B minor 7th flat 5. It could be an E 7th with a flat 9. Probably the lead sheet is going to say that. I'll show you something we can do different. Back to the B minor. Back to the E7 flat 9. Back to A minor 7th. So the whole tune is based on a very few chords. They're just put together in different places. The first two 8-bar phrases are the same, harmonically. The release involves a juxtaposition of those same chords. And then, except for the D7th in there, the D7 near the end, they're all the same chords in the last 8-bar phrase. However, well, let's just try playing it that way, and then maybe you can either play along with me if you're in tune with the videotape, or you can listen to my example. I'll play a chorus using these chords we figured out. Feel. Here we go. Now, let me show you just some more of the intricacies involved in reharmonizing a tune to the point where you get it at a level where you'd want to play it for your friends or something and do it nicely. There's several different routes of going from point A to point B. Let's take the last 8 bars. Now there's something that's evolved. I don't know who first figured it out in jazz. Another way of getting there. We go like this. It's a way from getting from the A minor to the F. Instead of going to the D7th, we go same, right? And now we go down chromatically from the A minor 7th to the A flat minor 7th to a G minor 7th to a C 7th, which is the dominant of F, which leads to the F. So here we've gotten a whole new set of colors by going right? It makes it a little more interesting, especially when you're improvising on scales on top of it. See what I mean? See what I'm getting at? Instead of going, we're going. We're at the same place. So we've got a little more complicated route. We're going through a couple different towns instead of on the throughway. That may be a little complicated for you now, but try jotting down those chords when you. I'd like to ask you now to write out these chords. You can go back over, and I've mentioned them all now. You can write out on a piece of music paper or just a regular sheet of paper, and for each beat you make a slash mark as you go along, and then you write the chord above it, like D minor 7th for 4 beats, and then a bar line, and then you do G 7th for 4 beats, and so on. You write out a little lead sheet so that you can pay attention to it when you improvise. And instead of going from the A minor 7th to D 7th, you're going to go. I forgot to mention, when you do get to the F, then you have to double up twice as fast and go. To get back into A minor, you have to go minor 2 chord, flat 5 to 5/7 back into 1. That's a progression 2-5-1 that we're really going to get to a lot in jazz. And here's a good example of it. 2 minor chord with a flat 5 going to the 5 chord. See, I'm thinking in A minor now. Here's 2-5-1, right? 2-5-1. So the 2 chord is going to be here. Here's your 5 chord, resolving to the what I'm calling 1 or A minor. In fact, there's more of those progressions, and this is really a 2-5 into C. You know, D, 2-5, G to C. You know, here we do it again. Now, something just came to mind talking about the 2-5-1 progressions. Just for a moment, for a few minutes, let's leave Autumn Leaves where it is. And I'd like to discuss that progression just from the 2 chord of a given scale to the 5 chord to the 1. It's a way of getting to the dominant and back into the tonic of any phrase. And it happens so frequently in most of the songs that we play in jazz that, you know, it's very familiar. You use it all the time, and almost all the cadences and the resolutions of popular songs, they usually come in through very often through a minor 2 chord to a dominant 7th chord on the 5 chord, and then back to the 1. So say in D minor, say in the key of C, we'd be going from the 2 note to the 5 to the 1, like we did a minute ago. So we go the D minor 7th to the 5 chord, G 7th, to the tonic. And this happens so frequently that it would be really worth your time to develop a thorough understanding of it. It doesn't always have to be the minor 2 chord to the 5. It's rarely the minor 5 chord. Let me show you what I mean. Sometimes it's the D 7th, not the minor 7th, to the. It happens all the time. And then the minor. So we can do it in any key. What I'd like you to do is start working on that. Pick any key you want. Let's say F. This is something we haven't worked on yet. So I look at the F scale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Right? So 2 is going to be, the 2 minor chord is going to be a G minor with a 7th. 2 minor 7th to the 5 chord, the dominant 7th, to the tonic. It could be a major 7th, it could be a 6th, it could be a 7th too. So usually there's a general rule that applies to this. When you're improvising over a 2-5-1, especially a minor 2 to the, that's probably the easiest way to voice it too, is like this. So you have the least movement in your left hand. Usually, if you play on the scale of the tonic chord, in this case it's an F major scale, if you improvise on that, the scale of the 1 chord, it's going to fit, the notes of that chord are going to fit the 2 minor, and they're going to fit the 5/7 chord, right? So all you have to do when you're improvising over this is think of your left hand, how it's moving, and remember to play the scale tones of the tonic chord. It really makes it simple. So. See? So you don't have to change this thinking of the scale you're improvising on. You just find your voicing you want, and you may want to like this. It's another way of voicing it. Or there's a million ways. Could be. Sometimes we go to the minor 6th chord. In fact, if you do an exercise, it's the 2 minor chord, the G minor 7th, 2 minor 7th, to the 5 7th chord, the C 7th, to the major 7th or just the tonic, or the 1 chord, and then go to the minor 6th chord too, which would be in this case 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 would be D, so it's a D minor 7th. So you'd be going, 2, 5, 1, 6, 2. I mean, it's like it's that same progression. So say we're in G minor. Now you can develop little exercises for yourself. You can pick a key. Let's pick another key. This A flat. Let's see, this is a little hard. So, what's the A flat scale? So the 2 minor is going to be a B flat minor chord. So we play the 7th, right? So you get. Now the 5 chord is going to be 2, 3, 4, 5. It's going to be E flat 7th, right? Still play the A flat scale over it. Now we're going to go to the major 7th of A flat, which is 3, 5, not the dominant 7th, but the major 7th, the leading tone, the one right next to the tone. And now we find the 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That'll be F minor 7th. 1, 2, 5, 7, right? So now we've got it in A flat. We go. Or you could play it. You know what I'm saying? So that's a good exercise to do. You play the scale of the tonic, the 1 chord, and find it in whatever key you're in. And then another thing, once you get really proficient in these, challenge yourself. Pick some hard scales, too. Don't just stick in C and F and G. Try some A flats and D flats, even B. You know, B is a beautiful key, and most people are scared to death of it. You know. That exercise, once you get it through the keys, you can do something else with it. You can play like, let's start in C, and we'll go up a half step at a time. Right? Right? We've gone up a half step now. See, I'm just taking it a half step up each time. Where did I start? Then, so I'm playing chords with my right hand. You could do it with your left hand. So once you get proficient at it, I'm giving you a little more to work on. Or another thing we can do is take, without going to the 1 chord, say we start in G minor again, and instead of going to the tonic, make that a 2. May be very fast. What I'm doing is I'm playing like G minor 7th to C 7th, and then I'm going down a whole step and doing the same thing as though I was going to E flat, but instead I'll go to E flat minor and then I'll go up. So you can develop exercises in a like that. You can fool around with yourself. And that gets you a real thorough knowledge of the keyboard. It may take you a long time to get these, so don't lose your patience. Keep going back over things that I've done, if you're not clear on something, and just work it out in 1 key at a time, and really take your time with it. But it's food for thought and for practice. It gives you a lot of harmonic and movement in the scales. That way you'll familiarize yourself with all the 12 major scales while you're doing this exercise. And you can spend a few years on this. I don't want to deceive you that you're going to learn how to do this overnight. It's going to take a lot of work on your part. Now let's go back where we were, talking about autumn leaves again. One thing is, I hope you've written out the chords that I gave you. You can go back, use some rewind, and figure out the right notation for all those chords and where they come. And have tried to play on it a little bit. Let me just play on the song for you. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the key of A minor. A lot of people play the song one whole step below instead of A minor in G minor. So it would start on I might start an improvisation with a slow chorus. Then maybe a tempo. That's a nice key for it. I did a lot of things in there that we hadn't talked about before, but some of them are complicated, some of them are pretty simple. Sometimes when you're heading for a tonic chord, say an E flat, you'll want to come in through a seventh semitone above. That's a nice sound. It's a good harmonic progression. I think it's best to leave a lot of the intricate stuff unsaid at this point because we're just getting started. I just wanted to show you some main principles. One, you can take any pop song that you like off a lead sheet. You can find a key for it, not necessarily the key that it was written in. Right? 3, you can change the melody and the harmonies around to suit you and to give it more of a jazz feel. It's the 4th thing you can do. At the same time, you can be working on your technique. You can learn the different scales that are involved in the improvisation. You can work on your pedaling. So there's a multifaceted ability to focus on many different things just by picking one song and the work you do on it. So if you look through, buy some sheet music, or maybe you have a fake book or a real book that has just the melody and the changes. Pick any songs that you like. Use a similar approach that we use, you know, like figuring out your basic chords. I know this is all left up to you. I really can't tell you what's right for this. I mean, you'll have to determine what's right for your development. And that's the joy of playing jazz. I mean, that I can't tell you. Like if I'm going to give you a Chopin etude to play, Chopin said, play those notes. I'm saying, play your own notes, which is quite a difference. So it puts the onus of the preparatory work and the study on your shoulders. But at the same time, the benefits that you gain from this are going to be reaped by yourselves. So consider what I'm saying just as guidelines and little signposts. As, think about the time or what scale are we using when we're playing on this. Little reminders that you can refer to. And remember that work we did with triads is very important because you're going to be using them all the time. You know, all that kind of stuff. It's going to start simple and it's going to start slow. Just have a lot of patience with it, and I think you'll gain a great deal. I thought I'd spend some time with you talking about the blues, since it's the basis of all jazz music. And in a few minutes we could accomplish a lot, enough so that you can start playing some simple blues tunes late at night and stuff like that. It's always fun to have that in your vocabulary. And one thing, on the piano, of course, we're dealing, when we're playing, say, chords going down like this. It's not like a guitar where you can just bar it and slide right down the guitar. We're working with a keyboard that's set up so that your finger's going to have to move in different positions for each chord. So I thought there's something that's really nice to know, and everybody likes it because it feels good on the keyboard and it also sounds good, is making use of the interval called the tritone. And it works particularly good when you're playing the blues. And what a tritone is, if you pick any tone and you go up 3 full tones, a tritone, you get a tritone. It's an interval of a tritone. It splits the octave in half because if you go up 3 from this one, 1, 2, 3, you're back where you started. So going up either 3 whole tones or 6 semitones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you get the interval of a tritone. What's nice about the tritone on the piano, and when it comes to the blues, is that if you take a C chord, say, right, and you want to play a 7th chord, a C7th, it happens that the 3rd and the 7th are a tritone apart. So if you play like this or if you play like this, it's going to make a nice C7th. You know, you can put in the G if you want to. You can put in the dominant if you want to. But now if you want to go up to the 4 chord, which is the F, and you play the 3rd and the 7th, all you have to do is slide down a half step, and you got that harmony. So and you want to go to the 5 chord, all you do is slip up 1, and you've got the 7th chords with the 3rd and the 7th in each one of them, whether you play them like this. You've got the 1, 4, and 5 chords and the 3rd and the 7th in each one of them, and all you're basically doing is moving your tritones around. So it's not a really difficult thing. And then if you want to really get fancy, like when you play an F chord, you play the 7th and the 3rd up here. There's your tritone, and you can add the 13th. And this feels real good under your hands. You know? all I'm doing here, you get fairly rich harmonic texture. It's just simply moving around by half steps. You can almost close your eyes and just feel down at what the next note is and get the right voice. So it's a nice way of learning some semi-juicy chords that work with the blues. So I thought, like if you take for the harmonic aspect of the blues, if you take a regular 12-bar simple blues, say blues in C, you start on your 1 chord and you have the tritone, right? In the 2nd bar you go to the F. 3rd bar, you can go down to the 5 chord and then back. Now we've covered 4 bars of it, right? The 5th bar you go to the 4 chord again. Back to 1. Now the 9th bar. So only using those few simple movements you can play a whole 12-bar blues. See? Now, another thing we sometimes do in jazz, let me a little faster. 1, 2, 3. You can go up a half step there. Now, when you get to the 5 chord, come down. Now you go to the 2 chord, to the 5. Back to 1. So here you got a progression that. See, now you can cover the whole chorus of blues with this other little progression in there, in the, I think it's the 6th and 7th bar. Now, in the right hand, blues works off a different scale, and we were working on the diatonic scale. Don't play a diatonic scale in the blues. First rule. It'll sound really weird. You want to. The blues scale has both the minor third and the major third in it. Now, if I had a guitar, I could play this and stretch it out, you know. On the piano, unfortunately, you have to imply that, you know. It also, let's see, it has that. It has the 5th for sure, and it has the 7th. And sometimes you'll use the 4th in it. You'll use the 6th. You can use almost all 12 notes with a blues scale and make them work. But the idea is which inflections the restorial tones, the ones you accent and the ones you land on. Like. And also, you can use the C blues scale over the other 2 chords, over the 4 chord. Now I'm just picking on those tones, you know. You'll have to do some experimenting for yourself on this, but in order to play a blues in C, then all we need is that blues scale in the right hand and the tritones in the left hand, and get somebody over to play the bass, you know, if you don't want to reach for it, because we can already. Now sometimes when I'm coming down, say I'm going, maybe this part that comes down, maybe I'll play on the scales of those chords. Or maybe I'll stay on the C blues scale. You can create a lot of tensions and releases that way. Sometimes, you know, you can play. Another thing you can use in the blues, say you get to the 5th and 6th bars, the 4 chord, you can go to an F sharp diminished chord. This is a diminished chord is just minor thirds going up, diminished 7th chord. So I like to voice it that. Then you can play that second, that C inverted triad we talked about with a 7th in it. The second inversion of the triad. And then start down. The thing is, almost all those chords, you've got that 3-7 thing going in the tritones. And that's a really nice vehicle. It's easy to feel on the keyboard. It lays nice. You can add the 13th by playing the 4th above it. If you, instead of the F chord, this will work for either F or the B chord. And then I have a raised 9th on it. Or I play an F13th if I use it here. But what I mean is, like, sometimes you want to play F7th and add a 13th. And then you'll want to play, the next chord is a C, and you'll just keep the... And that gives you the real bluesy raised 9th sound. So you can get used to playing these chords like this. You can find a lot of places to use them. Another thing you can do is you can add the 9th in here, like on an F chord. That's a real full sound. And they're relatively easy to play. It doesn't take a lot to... I'll play my bass notes down here just to show you the left hand. Those are your raised 9th voicings. If I play them up here, see, that gives me the raised 9th. If I want it to be the 13th chords, I go like this. Same chords. So, using this tritone, right? So now maybe you could play like a C jam blues, like Duke Ellington's tune or something, like very simply. You can play with one hand. And now I'll use the simple. Whichever way you use them, either that voicing or that voicing, it works. There's another thing you can do. You can put a note on top and play the... You can play... Just add a note on top of what you're playing. It gives... See, I'm all basing all those chords. Start adding other stuff. But they're all the real essence of it is using the third and the seventh in this tritone movement. And it's a real nice thing to learn on the keyboard. You know, you can have a lot of fun with it. Plus, it enters into very often you'll want to go from like what we'd call an F13th sus chord. This is like 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. And what it means is a sus. Well, let me talk about sus chords for a moment. Whenever you play in sevenths, like this, we have a thing called a suspended fourth. You may want to, instead of playing the third in the chord, you move it up and you play a fourth. So I've got an interval of a fourth here. This is called a sus4 chord. And you resolve it by taking it down to the third again. Maybe you hear it this way. You hear them all the time in music, in pop music, in jazz, everything. So another thing you can do with blues in certain places, you can use a G sus chord, sus4. Very often you'll find that movement happening too. So that's another nice thing. Right? There's one of those 13th chords. It sounds great with the flat 9 above it. Here I'm playing an F chord. It's this same voicing, right? But I'm making the sus out of it. So it's an F 13th, and I put a sus. So a lot of jazz is based on the blues. And it's really fun to learn to play the blues. I know that was one of the most enjoyable experiences I've ever had in my life. Not knowing how to play it and then getting together with some guys and having them show me the chords, similar to what I was doing here, and discovering those voices. I think it's a chance to have a lot of fun. It's not real complicated. It's the real essence of the music. And the things you discover by playing the blues, you find you use them all the time, even in the popular songs or in whatever you're playing. It's just such a part of jazz that it's a real good starting point. You can find out a lot about yourself. So I think our time is about up here. I urge you to work as much as you can on all those elements we talked about, the diatonic scales and the triads, and all the different major and minor scales, and listen to other people play. And I think it's really important to find out what it is you like, what do I want to play. You have to make that decision. And one way of doing it is by imitating what people have to show you. On some future lessons, I hope we'll do an example like we'll take something off a record that we really like, and see how that differs from the original version of it, and then maybe add something to make it your own. But you can pick and choose material without actually imitating people, although I don't put down imitation at a certain stage. I think it'd be really valuable to take stuff off of records. Try to, if you like a solo or something, try to slow down the machine to half speed, take the notes, find out what he was doing, how the fingering works. He or she, pardon me. There's such a wealth there that we mentioned that you shouldn't just work on your own. And another very important point that I like to cover is to get together with friends. It's good to get together with your peers, and it's also good, whenever possible, to play with people that are at a greater stage of development than you are. It's never bad to be the worst guy in a band. because you'll learn more that way than any other way, really, in personal contact, especially in improvisational music, which at a certain stage when you're playing, you're going to want to jam with other people, and the sooner you do it, the better. I think the more you're going to learn. It's been a real pleasure to teach you some of these basic elements, and if you have other questions, we're going to be doing some more in this series, some more advanced stuff for you players that are further along, but I hope I haven't confused the beginners too. I wanted to keep this at a stage where you'd gain the maximum from it. Plus I mentioned before, I did a set of audio tapes for Homespun too that goes into much greater detail, especially on the intermediate and advanced points of jazz piano playing. So I look forward to seeing you again soon, and say goodbye.